Good evening. Welcome to our shir this evening, Thursday of Parshas Vayikra. Dedicating this to the bris of my grandson Eliyahu, who's had his bris yesterday, son of Avremel and Mushki Raskin. They should be zecher. Parents should be zecher to be gadol Torah chuppah tovim techar chava. We're going to deal with the first question tonight about the Birchas Ha'ilanos, and we didn't see the Rebbe making a public event of it. But we'll see later that the Rebbe did make a point of doing this, saying this bracha. But let's start off. We have here the way it's brought in the Alter Rebbe's Seder Birchas Hanenin, Hayotzei B'mei Nisan. You're going out on the days of Nisan, and you see Ilonos Shemotziim Perach. You see trees which are producing blossoms. So you make a bracha, and there's a whole long list of bracha. Shloi chisar v'olam be'klum. And it finishes off you only make the bracha once in a year. Now, the pashtus, that means like this: that if you saw there's a tree, a blossom tree once, and you didn't say a bracha, then the next time you see a tree with blossoms, you cannot say the bracha because it's only on the first sight of a tree with blossoms. Now, we have here a note of the Rebbe. When it says Yotze B'mei Nisan, does it mean Nisan as in the Jewish calendar month? Or has it got to do with the Nisan, the Tkufa, which means spring? This time of the year would be called Nisan. We had listened in Gemara Rosh Hashanah, we've got what's called Nisan de Tkufa. It's the spring, which is the month of the beginning of the spring. So the Rebbe has here a ha'ora. Some wish to say that Nisan is not limited to Nisan specifically, and others say no, it's only dafka in the month of Nisan, in the Jewish month of Nisan. Just to explain the question, because trees, the cycle of trees has got to do with summer-winter cycle. That's the solar cycle. That's a solar year of 365 days. The lunar year of 12 lunar months is sometimes a bit earlier in the seasons and sometimes a little bit later. So it is a little bit not so. It would have been more logical to say we mean Nisan of the solar cycle, solar year. And yet there are those who say Dafka Nisan of the lunar year, are what we call Nisan in Halacha. Now the word, by the way, the word Nisan comes from also the word Nitzonim, which means blossoms. It's a time of blossoming. The Rebbe picks up here on the Alter Rebbe wrote the halachas about brachas in three versions. First, he wrote the Shulchan Aruch, which he never published in his lifetime. The Shulchan Aruch was published 3 years posthumously. Then the Alter Rebbe published what's called the Luach Birchas Hanenin. I think it's 12 or 13 chapters. Around Tov Kuf Nun Vav. And then, a couple of years later, he publishes a Seder Birchas Hanenin. And there are lots of changes between those two compendiums of the halachas of brachas. And what the Rebbe is picking up, that in the Luach Birchas Hanenin, the Alter Rebbe writes that if you had said Birchas Halanos at the beginning of the month, and then after 30 days, you see again, so you should say the bracha below Shema Malchus. The fact that you have more than 30 days means that Nisan means not Nisan in the 29-day month of the or 30-day month. However, in the Seder Birchas Hanenin, in the Seder, the Alter Rebbe skipped this inyan, and you could say it's because he held that you don't say the bracha twice, or, said the Rebbe, it makes more sense to say that the Alter Rebbe in the later version holds that Nissan for this bracha means Dafka Nissan, Dafka the Jewish month of Nissan. Now, as I said, that's not so logical if you're talking about seasons, but if you take Nissan as in a more spiritual way, as we'll see, so then it makes sense. It's limited to the Nissan of the Jewish month of Nissan. Now we have here a quote from the Chidah in the Sefer Moira Be'etzma. He says you should go out of your way to say Biras Hailonis. And the Medakta Pikim are particularly should be Dafke Nissan. And should be 2 trees, and they would go out to the fields to say the bracha. You should say the bracha with great intensity because this is effective in Tikkun HaNeshamas. You've got Neshamas which are Mizgalgel, are enclosed in Atzi Besomim, in fragrant trees and in herbs, and Vivakesh Aleim Rachamim. So in this bracha, you have here now a whole new spiritual aspect to it. It's got to the Tikkun HaNeshamas, and therefore it makes sense that it's got to do with the Jewish month of Nisan, or at least makes more sense. Here you have also from the Piskei Teshuvos, he says, although not broadly people are not so fussy about saying this bracha, but Talmid Chachomim Yerei Hashem are particular about this, and he brings some further discussion about that. Now, about the saying it only the first time, as we saw, Rag B'Pam Ela B'Pam Harishono. So here is a note in the Seder V'Chasanenin, a note from the editor, quoting from Badei HaShulchan from Reb Chaim Noah. Mashma, that if you didn't say a bracha when you saw it first, you wouldn't say the bracha when you see it next time, unlike the position of the Sefer El Yerabo. So, perhaps I told this before, I used to have the next door neighbor had a pear tree, and the time where I would see it was from the bathroom window, which obviously I couldn't make a bracha from there. So then I've seen it. I've already seen a blossom a tree with blossoms. The next time I see a tree with blossom, I can't make a bracha because I've already seen one. I didn't make a bracha then. So it's only the first time. Now then you ask the question when it comes to shechionu. There is an idea of saying it the second time, below Shema Malchus. If an event which you say Shechion, you didn't say the first time, to say it the second time without Shema Malchus, why is that not mentioned over here? So he says, there's a difference. This is all Reb Chaim Noah. He says, Shechion has got to do with Simcha, and there may be some Simcha the second time round. Whereas Birchas Ha'ilona is a praise for the fact that Hashem made the cycle of creation. And if it were because of Simcha, so you should make a separate Birchas Hailonis and different types of trees. So it's not so much on the trees, it's on this phenomenon of nature of the union of blossoms. However you learn Pshat, okay. Where are we holding? And here you got from the Birkei Yosef, we bring Svaras, it can be even not during the month of Nisan. ואני שמעתי, הדיברוך הזה על דרך האמס, שייך דווקא לימי ניסן. Al Pi Kabbalah, this bracha is said dafka in the month of Nisan. And that brings therefore the question, he's talking earlier about almonds, which ripen earlier. So you go in the month of Adar, you can see the almonds. So once that also raises the question, if you've already seen blossoming before Nisan, and you didn't make a bracha because it wasn't Nisan, could you say the bracha during Nisan? Well, you've already seen, it's too late. You didn't say the bracha the first time. So it's quite confusing. Now, I originally, before I prepared this shir, or as I was under the impression, you take the Hamodia paper, and you see this Rebbe and that Rebbe, they're going out to the fields, and there's a whole fanfare of Birchas Hailonis, and we never saw that by the Rebbe. So I'd never seen it. But here there's a sefer called Maaseh HaMelech, and he writes that the Rebbe would say the bracha on the trees from his room. Although there's only one tree in the forecourt, which bears cherries. Now, don't ask me the facts. I didn't check. I never really paid attention. I know there's a big tree, which is some kind of pine tree in the front of the Rebbe's office, but I never noticed that there's also a cherry tree over there. Now, this that the Rebbe said from the window of his room, that's quoted from Rav Leibel Grana. And another Bacher says that in the earlier years, when the Rebbe would walk home, so he would say a bracha on a tree which is somewhere on the pavement in the middle of Eastern Parkway, like whatever you call it in American, the path which is between the side lanes and the big road in the middle. And one time, this Bacher says that one time he saw that the Rebbe came out of 770 on the way to his home, and he saw a tree full of flowers and of blossoms. The Rebbe went back to 770, brought his siddur, and said the bracha. All right, so that's Pam Horishoina. So we see that the Rebbe was knowing to say this bracha, although not with the fanfare, and possibly because if once you've seen it, you can't go back. And so, right, one last thing. Now, this is interesting, very interesting Hashgacha Pratis. Now in Rambam, in 3 Prakim a day, we are learning about with this bracha. We're learning about brachas, and the bracha Bechas Soilonis comes up. Now, this is in Sicha Chelik Chav Gimel, and it's talking really about the staff of Aaron, which produces almonds and all that. So the translation of Ayoytze Perach is Vapek Lav Levin. Now, then he quotes the Gemara, which talks about going up Bimei Nissan and sees trees which do Malav Levin, which was producing blossoms. So the Livlov and Perach seems to be a similar thing. Now, at this point, the Rebbe says, the impression is that this Malavleve could be also, it's just the blossoming, can also be with trees which don't produce fruit. Then the Rebbe picks up in the Lashon Harambam, and from this, the Rebbe is suggesting means that they're beginning to produce fruit. And then he quotes, so the change from livluv to perach, suggesting it means, although I'm not so clear why the switch over, not so convincing. But meanwhile, he has also Shulchan Aruch says, if you didn't say the bracha until the fruit have started, and so you got the impression that it's dafka a fruit tree, and that's indeed in the Baer Heitev brings from the Halachas Ketanas that it's only on fruit trees. In the footnote in the Shulei Hagilion, the Rebbe picks up also on the Girsa. The Lashon of the Gemara is that the Rebbe to create the bracha is lihisnois b'hem b'nei Adam. Lihisnois would mean to glorify, to beautify, to give, enjoy the beauty. The Rambam and Shulchan Aruch change from the word lihisnois to the word lehonos, which means to have benefit. Indeed, Rashi on the Gemara also translates lihisnois means lehonos. And then there's another Girsa, this Adein. So if you say it's lehisnois, this is the Rebbe's note over here. If you say it's lehisnois, it would also be good on non-fruit trees. Once you say lehonois, it makes more sense that it's got to do with fruit trees. So when I first heard this about the Rebbe saying a bracha, I didn't remember there's a cherry tree there, and I was thinking the Rebbe would make a bracha on the pine tree. But then, as we see here, that they are saying that there is indeed a cherry tree, so the Rebbe would say the bracha. So if you do confront a fruit tree and you haven't seen blossoms till now, and you remember the bracha, so say the bracha. Okay, let's move on. So here's a question. Shliach he's got his shul within an Eruv area, and there are many people who will come to shul on Shabbos, but will not come the night of the Seder. So he's asking, can I use the opportunity to give them matzah to take home on Shabbos day, so that they shall have matzahs for Friday night, which is the Seder. The obvious question is that you're not allowed to prepare from one day to the other. So he's asking, is there any tzad heter? So for example, if Purim is on Motzei Shabbos, even if there's an Erev, you're not allowed to bring the Megillah from your house to shul because it's preparing on Shabbos for after Shabbos. So here you're preparing matzah on Shabbos for after Shabbos. However, I did share with him that there's a sefer called Charles Teshuvas Maharshag, and he's dealing with a story of a small shtetl where someone sees a Jewish man walking along with a goy on Shabbos after the goy had milked the cows. So they'd gone to the farm, at the edge of the town, and the goy had milked the cows in presence of the Yid. So it's Cholav Yisrael. It belongs to the goy. Now then, the goy is carrying the milk to deliver it from the farm to the house of the Jew. Now, he doesn't go into the issue of carrying. Possibly there was an Erev there. He's dealing with the union of preparing on Shabbos for after Shabbos. So how could you have the goy carrying the milk for you, and it's a preparation on Shabbos for after Shabbos? So he comes up with a very interesting yesod, which was debatable, which is a very interesting yesod nevertheless, and that is that the concept of not preparing on Shabbos for after Shabbos, that's to save time. You're not allowed to use Shabbos to save time after Shabbos. So the Alter Rebbe talks about not rolling the Sefer Torah on one day of Yom Tov for the other day of Yom Tov, on Shabbos for Yom Tov, etc. So it takes time to roll the Sefer Torah. So you say, why should I do it? I'll wait for tomorrow. I can do it now. I've got spare time. So Shabbos doesn't provide spare time for after Shabbos. But this is his yesod, when that opportunity will not be available later, then you are allowed to do the preparation on Shabbos. So in that case, his assessment of the milk situation was that the opportunity to have Cholav Yisrael, the guy will, if you're going to leave the milk there, the guy, then it won't be Cholav Yisrael anymore because they won't seal it, whatever it was. The circumstances were that if it's left in the farm, it's not going to be Cholav Yisrael. And therefore, you can only have the Cholav Yisrael if it's the guy's going to bring it to your house now. Okay, so that's an opportunity which won't be available Motzei Shabbos. Therefore, Maharshag, he says it is okay. So coming back to our question, when you got these people to come to shul on Shabbos, they're not going to be there tonight. It's not going to be feasible for you to go to their house. I'm saying, if it's not feasible for you to go around to their houses on Motzei Shabbos, just as you're preparing for the Seder, so then it's not they want to save time. It's just that this opportunity that they are able to take matzah is not going to be there later. Therefore, there is room to be mekel. Having said that, in Tovshin Lamed Zayin, as you know, the Rebbe would give out matzah on before Pesach. I remember as a child we used to get in the mail. My uncle David Oliver Shalom would put into an airmail envelope a few pieces of matzah, and he'd pop it into the mail, and that would be normally we'd get it during Chol Hamoed. Would come in airmail, little pieces of the Rebbe's matzah, which the Rebbe gave out on Erev Pesach. So the Rebbe gave out matzahs on Erev Pesach, freshly baked by B'yoyim. But when it was Shabbos Erev Pesach, and someone came to the Rebbe and asked after Mincha, whatever, and asked for matzah, and the Rebbe says, you can't give it now because it's preparing on Shabbos for after Shabbos. That's not a contradiction to what I've just said, because very simple, that there it was possible the Rebbe was able to give it after Shabbos. You don't have time, you're in a rush, that's your problem. But it was possible to do after Shabbos, and therefore you wouldn't be allowed to do it on Shabbos. I just want to throw in, at the same time, a practical thing, and I've written about this in one of the Sfarim, which is referred to possibly in the footnote, possibly not, and that is about taking out kompot. from the freezer, they should defrost until the evening. So you're not allowed to prepare from one day of Yom Tov for the other. Are you allowed to take out a compote from the freezer on Sunday morning, Sunday 12 o'clock, and leave it on the counter, and by Sunday evening, it will have defrosted. So you're preparing on one day for the next. And the conclusion I came to was that it is permitted. The reason being there that the change from ice to edible compote is happening by itself. It's true you have to take it out of the fridge, out of the freezer, and put it at room temperature, but then the actual change is happening by itself. It's not like you are, Alter talks about going to the cellar and bringing up bottles of wine. So now the wine, you've done the preparation, now it's ready. What's it for? It's for tonight. With the frozen compote, it's not ready when you take it out of the freezer. The readiness will come by itself in due course, and because of that, perhaps other reasons also, it is permitted to take it out and to allow it to defrost to be ready for the evening. Okay, let's move on. So here's on the screen, you have here a masher to take boiled potatoes, which are soft, but then you want to make them into mashed potatoes. So you've got this kind of masher. Perhaps it's also something that's called a ricer. It comes out through these little holes, and then you from the whole potato, the whole cooked potato comes out into a mashed potato. Are you allowed to use those on Yom Tov? So I've got here on the screen from a sefer called Yom Tov Kilchosai, and he says that it is permitted to use it. And the same thing, whether it's banana or avocado, it's okay. I want to address something which he has in his notes. That what about mashing a banana, mashing a avocado on Shabbos? So I said, his question is called grinding. Grinding means you take something like grain and you grind it, it becomes small separate particles called flour. Here, when you mash an avocado or banana, it does not come into particles, it remains as a mush. So he quotes here the Chazon Ish is the one who holds that mashing is also included in issue of Teichen and makes it into a Chiyuv Chatos. The Igros Moshe disagrees with him, and he says no, mashing is not grinding, because grinding, as I said, is creating particles. Here, you're creating a mush, and therefore, it's even on Shabbos, mashing wouldn't be a malacha. Having said that, there's this debate about on Shabbos, but on Yom Tov, certainly one can rely on the that this mashing is permitted, because really even grinding would be on Yom Tov would be Yisod Rabbanon, and here it's not really grinding. It's also one of the rules for what you're allowed to do on Yom Tov is the things which are normally done for immediate use, for same day use, you're allowed to do on Yom Tov. Malachas are normally done in bulk for several days' supply. That's the kind of thing you shouldn't be doing on Yom Tov. So picking fruit from your apple tree would be something which you'd normally do in bulk, and that's why you're not allowed to pick fruit off a tree. Whereas cooking is something which you do for immediate use, and that you are allowed to do on Yom Tov. Okay, that's about the using the masher. As we said, that is permitted to use on Yom Tov. Now we've got next question. A Jewish lad has got a job as a waiter in a non-Jewish, non-kosher restaurant, and he's worried. He'll come for Pesach. He's already taken off Shabbos and the days of Yom Tov. He's not going. But is asking if he's going to take up the whole of Chol Hamoed, is worried that the employer will say, well, we don't need you next week. So he's asking, is there any leeway for him to be serving as a waiter in a non-Pesach food in a Goyish restaurant? So before even dealing with a Pesach issue, even a whole year round, is it appropriate? Is it permitted for a Yid to be a waiter in a kosher deli, etc., kosher restaurant. So we have here a chapter in Shulchan Aruch, Yerdei Kuf Yud Zayin, Shaloi Lase Schoira Midavar Isur, not to make business with tray for food. Now, uh, this is a little bit debatable whether this applies to being a waiter. Is the Isur of Schoira because you might come to eat it from it? Then that would certainly apply to a waiter who might eat from the tray for food. If you say the Schoira has got to do with parnosa, making parnosa from tray for stuff, then the waiter is not. So that it's debatable whether a Jew is allowed to be a waiter in a treifa restaurant. But leaving that question to one side, now the question is on Pesach. So this question was put to a couple of rabbonim, and predictably one said yes, and the other one said no. Um, and the one who said yes didn't give much of an explanation. He didn't see it as he's not benefiting, he's just a waiter. The one who said no says that by being a waiter, you are benefiting from the chametz. He's going to get a wage for serving, and so because he's serving food, including the chametz, he's benefiting from the chametz. The second argument he made is that he's got a achrayus, he's got responsibility for the food, because as he's serving, if it would drop and get dirty, he would be responsible to replace it. And therefore he's got a achrayus, therefore he's Bal Yiroah is over because of achrayus. The second reason I question whether that is true, whether a waiter drops something, especially if it's a loaf of bread, whether he would have to replace it. He'd probably just pick it up and maybe a puff and put it back on the plate when no one's looking. But does he have parnosa? Is he getting parnosa from chometz? Yes. And here you have, I gave another source, is you have in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch in Siman Tov Mem Gimel, where it says that the Isur Hanoah, chometz is also b'hanoah, even the chometz of a goy is also b'hanoah on Pesach. And he writes in brackets, and therefore you wouldn't be allowed to consciously enjoy the fragrance of baking bread of a goy. So you're just smelling the fragrance. That's a hanoah. It's hanoah from a goy's chometz, and that's also b'hanoah. So I think the having a job of serving chometz. What about if you were a porter? You wouldn't be allowed to earn money from carrying chometz. This is part of his job, is to carry the chometz, and I don't think that's okay because it's a benefit from the chometz from the transport of the chometz. You can see it's not totally black and white, but it would be not an appropriate environment. Yeah, not totally clear. Yeah, if it means that he's going to lose his job. Right, let's move on. Yeah. Right. So someone's asking, why is there this whole fuss of having chometz on our Shabbos Erev Pesach or Lechem Mishnah? Why don't you just use Mazonos matzahs, egg matzahs? Then you're safe. It's kosher Pesach, and use that for Lechem Mishnah. Now, I didn't go into the svara of being Yotze Lechem Mishnah with Mazonos. If you wanted to have hamoitzi, if you wanted to make hamoitzi on egg matzahs, so let me explain something. Everyone knows, the Gemara says, that if you make mazonos into kviyas suda, you make it into a meal, then it becomes hamoitzi. So you're making a meal out of egg matzahs, so then it's hamoitzi. It's not so straightforward, because in the Alter Rebbe's Seder B'Chasanen, and he goes through, say, base halacha base, he talks about different shiurim. Let's say if a person had one half a matzah. Says that I'm happy with that. I'm satisfied with that. When we could say no, that doesn't count half hamotzi because botlo daito etzel kol adam. It's not normal to be say that half a matzah is already a meal. And even though you say it is a meal, so you're unusual, but it would go according to the usual thing. So therefore, we got to do with it's a kind of a balance between the individual's um, diet, etc., and the normal diet. And so I'm just going to point out over here, v'imsova mimenu, if you had mezoinus and you are satisfied, yitel yodo v'yivorech hamoitze birchas hamozon olov levadai. You can make hamoitzi on mezoinus, and you can say the full benching on mezoinus if you're satisfied. Provided you ate the quantity of 4 eggs, the equivalent in mass of 4 eggs. If you had mezonos and you're satisfied, but we can't make hamotzi on that because it might be botlodite circle odom. And therefore, Yevorech al kazayas lechem achet chilo hamotzi. So if you're going to have, let's say, you buy a pack of sandwiches. A regular pack of sandwiches is 2 slices of bread, and you're going to say, I'm satisfied. That's my lunch. Can you make hamotzi on 1 pack of sandwiches? And you say, yeah, you're satisfied, but it still remains a suffix because in 1 pack of 2 slices of bread is a little bit less than the volume of 4 eggs. So it still remains a suffix. And therefore, to make the mezonos matzah, the egg matzah, to use it for lechem mishnah, to make hamotzi, you'd have to have the equivalent of daled beim. Now, there is a very good sefer by someone called Rav Pinchas Bodner, who did a lot of homework for us that to tell us the various foods. The sefer is called kazayas. What is a kazayas in the mass of various foods? So he lays down that 4/10 of a machine matzah would be a kazayas. Now, I worked out that in order to have, and now kazayas is a half an egg. So in order to have daled beim, that would have to multiply 4/10 by 32. Yeah, 8 times multiply 4 by 8. That brings me to 32. That's 3 matzahs and a fifth of a matzah. So that's quite a lot of matzah to work through. In addition to your short amount of time. Well, actually, no, you're not. It's not. Well, you're not so pressed for time actually because it's kosher Pesach and it's not. But at any rate, it is a fair amount for a person to have in one setting to go through more than 3 whole matzahs. So therefore, if you can't make a hamotzi on it, then you go back to. That's why most of us are not going to do that. We're going to go and get these pitas, which are going to be hopefully crumbless, and we eat them in bags, and we'll manage. Bez Hashem. Okay, let's go on a totally unrelated topic, and that is got this shiloh from somewhere in Europe. Look at that beautiful shul. So now you've got here a shul which has got a mechitza dividing, and that's obviously it's used as a snoshim. But on a weekday, there's one fellow who's sitting on the other side of the mechitza, and sitting on the other side of the mechitza. And what the question is he mitzaref to the shir, to the minyan? And so it's all one room. So is he mitzaref to the minyan? So here we have from the Shulchan Aruch, Sorach shiyu kol ha'asora b'mokim echad. Shniach tzivur imohem. You need to have the 10 people in one space. Now, it is all in one space, but there happens to be a divider down the middle. And so now we have in the Bayer Hativ, he brings Sheyesh Tisha, the Mokim Echot, the Echot Achar Haviloin Shepoisim Litznius. If one of them is behind a screen, which is for tznius, I guess like Esas Noshim, Mitztorfim. The Pir Chodesh says sometimes you have a screen for tznius, sometimes you have a screen which is needed for when there's a Sefer Torah in a bedroom, so then you'd need to have a screen to make it a separate reshus. But it seems to be quite clear if it's screened just for tznius, just for well, for Esas Noshim is a din of tznius, so then it's considered still one room, and so the person is mitzaref to the minyan. Now I saw in the Piskei Teshuvos quoting from Reb, I think it was Piskei Teshuvos. No, I saw it in the Dirshu edition of the Mishnah Berurah, bringing from Chaim Kanievsky that it's near that it's not mitzaref. He may have that opinion, but in Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch it's quite clear that there's that in Hilchos Shabbos there's a screen, as was pointed out here. There's a screen to divide the reshus. That's in the case of the Sefer Torah. There you need a screen to make it a separate reshus. But a screen for Ezas Noshim is not to separate the reshus. It's there just for tznius, and as a result, that divider doesn't break up the room into two rooms, and the person behind the screen is mitzaref. So that's they come to us. That's why I answered. What else do we have here? Oh, okay. And this is, I'm going to be a bit makatzer, but I'm going to share with you one last point. And that is one time, it was the night before, night of B'dikas Chometz, the night before, whatever, one of my neighbors in Lubavitcher, he comes in and he wants to sell the Chometz, fine. And so I write down that your Chometz in your house, and V'chol Mokem Shehu. Wherever it is. So he says, that means the 10 pieces are also included in the Mechilas Chometz. So when I'm burning the 10 pieces, I'm burning the goy's 10 pieces. So I was a little bit taken aback with the question. Obviously, we don't mean to sell the 10 pieces. But we don't write in the star, oh, but the 10 pieces are not sold. We sell all Chometz. Obviously, it's obvious, yeah? We don't mean to sell that. So, all right. So that obvious, I came across this week, this last week, whatever, in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, in Siman Tov Mem Ches, where he talks about the sale of chametz. So let's take a look at what we have over here. You sold the chametz to the guy. You should give him the key. Or nowadays we don't. We just tell them the key is available. Okay. Then he says you don't put your own personal seal on the chametz to intimidate the goy from taking from the chametz without your permission, without your knowledge. Then he says, if you did put a seal on, then the chametz is also b'hanureh, because you have blocked. If you did that before the sale, so then you kind of reclaimed, you've violated the sale, and it's as if you didn't sell it. Now, so let's read these last two lines. The kevon shebeshas mechira. If you put the seal before the sale, or at the time of the sale, so by putting a seal on, you have demonstrated to the goy that you don't want him to take from the chametz without your permission. So then you haven't sold it. It's just a total sham. So now what's being said here is, although we've gone through a document and we've spoken and everything, but if I put a seal on it, so then that is invalidating the sale. Now I want to work the other way. I want to use that. I want the whole sale to go, but there is one packet of 10 pieces of bread, which I clearly don't want to sell. I'm not validating the rest of the sale, but this part, it's a megala daitoi, a megala das that I don't want this to be included in the sale. So it's not included in the sale. So when it's evident that it's not included in the sale, even though that wasn't stipulated in the contract, it's not included in the sale. And we just want to finish off that, although at risk of a bit of repetition, I got a question today from someone who listens to the recording of the Shurim. They're making in their Chabad house. They're making after davening. They're going to have in the car park. They're going to make kiddush and bring out some bagels, whatever, and make hamotzi before there's man. Obviously, they says once we're finished, can we put the rest of the bagels back in the shul's freezer? So I said no, that doesn't work. Either you've sold it or you haven't sold it. If you've sold it, then you've got no business taking it and using it. If you haven't sold it, and that's why you're using it, so then putting it back in the freezer is not going to solve anything because it's still yours. You put your chametz in the freezer with the guy's chametz, but those rolls which you're retaining for use on Shabbos, so they're not included in the sale. So I said, oh, no, that would not be a solution. And we've said, what do you do if you have leftover chametz? So if it's a little bit, you can flush it. If it's a larger amount, give it to a goy. Or I mentioned, I think last time, if you find a friendly neighbor who's got a few little kids who are hungry, for last week they've been living on potato crisps, let them come along and enjoy your shirayim, and everybody will be happy. I'm going to wish you all a kosher felach and yom tov. No shir next Thursday evening, and yeah, we should have a Chag Geula, Mismach Geula leGeula, Geula Hamitis v'Hashlema with Mashiach Tzidkenu, Nechal Shom in Ha Sochim and Asvochim, etc. Someone, I'm just reading this the chat. Don't we tell people to lock their chametz away? Isn't it like a seal? On the contrary, we're saying that the sealed places, the marked places, that's what belongs to the goy. We're not sealing it against the guy. We're on the contrary that when we put the stickies on the doors, we're saying whatever's behind there it belongs to the guy. Um, Someone's asking, what about the key or code to enter the house of someone who's going away for Pesach? When people come to me to sell chametz, I ask them if they're going away. I ask them, is there a key available? Sometimes with a neighbor. Sometimes they'll just give me, or I ask them what's the phone number where someone can, if the guy wanted to, he has access to get the key to go in. So generally, we do try to make sure that keys will be available on demand. Okay. Kol Tov.
Kosher Pesach. Pesach.